The band is back together.
My answer to that would be, who the F cares?
We do.
I do.
We do, Mike. We do.
I do.
We're all back. Everybody carried the load while I was out on leave, and it's great to be back talking college hoops, which I know nothing about, which is why it's perfect to have a guest to bring on to fill us in on what we need to know. David Cobb covers college hoops for CBS at David W. Cobb on Twitter. David, good morning to you. Let's get the outrage out of the way first. Everybody wants to scream and yell when the bracket is revealed. Who were we outraged by not making the tournament this year?
Well, I mean, I hope you weren't screaming and yelling because it sounds like you've got a newborn child at home. I don't think
yes.
Yeah.
Congratulations. No, he did all the screaming and yelling for me yesterday. He was very upset that St. John's wasn't in, evidently.
Well, David, I think the congratulations would have been nice the day of because I think he hates his kid already, 7 weeks in.
Well, yeah, there were some snubs. There was some reason to scream and cry, no matter if you're an infant or an adult. If you're a Mountain West fan, you're screaming and crying that your school's got a pretty rough go of it in terms of the seeding. But at the end of the day, Mountain West teams got a lot more bids than the Big East. If you're a Mountain West fan, you got a lot more bids than the ACC, which is kind of wild when you think about where that league falls historically in the college basketball hierarchy. But I think the one that sticks out to me the most, the team that has the biggest or the best gripe is Iowa State. Not only did they get snubbed from that fourth number 1 seed that went to North Carolina instead, but they're a number 2 seed in the East region, and they got to go through UConn. They got to go through an Illinois team that just won the Big Ten tournament, and they've got to go through an Auburn team that just won the SEC tournament. So Iowa State, man, there was no reward whatsoever for that Big 12 tournament title, and they got a rough path ahead of them.
Well, David, I know we're going to ask you about the matchup between Oregon and South Carolina, and you feel for that game right now, but they did draw, I think, what most people, you'd rather be in the Midwest region, and if you think we're off on this, that's fine, but Purdue, I think everybody kind of views Purdue in the same light, very fraudulent 1 seed. They couldn't even get to their conference title game in the tournament. They're in the Midwest. Of all the 1 seeds, that's the best region, right? That's the region you want if you weren't a 1, is you want to go to the Midwest because that's where Purdue is?
Well, I think that's the best region if you're Purdue and you want to make a run, because you look at number 4 seed Kansas in the Midwest. That is not your typical Kansas. That is not your typical Bill Self team. They have struggled with injuries. They were already light on depth, and now their 2 star players are hobbled. And then you look at Gonzaga, and everybody's like, oh, wow, Gonzaga's only a 5 seed? They're usually a 2 or a 3 or even a 1. Well, the fact is Gonzaga probably deserved to be more like an 8 seed based on their body of work, but because of the name recognition, because of who their coach is, I think they got a little bit of a boost from the committee. So I actually think that the Midwest sets up pretty nicely for a Purdue redemption tour, just with some of the seedings and the teams they ended up with in their section of the bracket.
Interesting. We're talking with David Cobb. He covers college hoops for CBS. Friend of the show at David W. Cobb on Twitter. You can go give him a follow there. Let's get to that Oregon matchup. Dane Altman is great this time of year. He's, for some reason, a controversial topic amongst some Duck fans who think they should deserve better or demand better, and I don't quite understand it. He's been to the tournament more often than not. He's had runs to the Elite Eight, to the Final Four, multiple runs to the Sweet 16. Here he is again back in the tournament. I have not seen South Carolina play 1 second of basketball this year, so what do I need to know, and what do we make of an Oregon team who maybe is getting healthy and poised to go on a run at the right time?
Hey, well, lucky for you, I was at the SEC tournament this past week, so I've seen those Gamecocks up close and personal. I love the storyline of Jermaine Couisnard playing against his old team. He was at South Carolina for 4 years. Now he's Oregon's leading scorer. And I think it's interesting or worth pointing out, what was it, 3 years ago now, Oregon State won the Pac-12 tournament and then went on a run to the Elite Eight.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So there is a fairly recent precedent here of a team from that area of the country winning the Pac-12 tournament and then going on a run. So if you're going based off of momentum, you got to love Oregon in this matchup, because South Carolina, after winning its first game in the SEC tournament, they just got smacked by Auburn. But basically the quick scout for all the Ducks fans out there on South Carolina is that they are led by a second-year coach in Lamont Paris, who comes from that Wisconsin tree of like Bo Ryan and Greg Gard, where they like to play real slow, and they like a game in the 60s, maybe the 70s, but nothing more than that. And they got a veteran squad. They're real physical. Like, they look almost like a football team when you roll the ball out there. But you know what? Oregon's got N'Faly Dante, so I don't necessarily think that they're going to be intimidated by that. So I'm actually kind of leaning Ducks here just based off the momentum they're bringing into the tournament.
Now, Washington State's got a 7-10 draw with Drake. I'm not going to pretend to know anything about Drake, but we've seen the Cougars a few times this year throughout conference play. What do you make of the matchup for the Cougars? Is this a favorable one or one where maybe Drake's got their number?
It's tough. It's a tough matchup. Drake's got a squad that's kind of been knocking on the door for a while now under Darian DeVries, and they've not broken through to win an NCAA tournament game, but they have perennially been among the best teams in the Missouri Valley, which is on your higher end of mid-major conferences. So this isn't some like little sleepy Cinderella with a bunch of, zero-star prospects. Like, I mean, there's some good players on that Drake team led by, Tucker DeVries, who's the coach's son. But, honestly, it's a situation where if he wasn't the coach's son, he'd be at a high major. But, like, he's taking the hey, this guy's my dad discount, and he's playing for Drake, It's kind of like when McDermott played for his dad at Creighton a while back. But anyway, no, I'd be afraid of that matchup if I'm Washington State. Just also, too, it doesn't feel like the Cougs are maybe, like, at their peak right now. So, Drake obviously coming in off that Missouri Valley Conference title. I think that obviously gives them some momentum going into the dance.
Yeah, that Indiana State game was pretty electric in the second half. I want to ask you real quick on Kyle Smith, the coach for Washington State. Diebler signs at Ohio State. Coug fans, where should they be right now with their coach? I know the tournament's still here. They still got to play a game, but what do you think his likelihood of being poached is?
Yeah, I'd still say it's certainly plausible. I mean, the big opening right now that everybody's kind of waiting to see what happens with is Louisville, because that one is high enough up on the food chain to where it could set off a massive chain reaction. Like, if Louisville hires a sitting power conference head coach, maybe even from a program of the ilk of UCLA, hypothetically, if Mick Cronin were to jump, right? Well, then UCLA is open, and they're going to try to hire a sitting Power 5 coach, and then all of a sudden, the same thing happens that we saw with college football when Nick Saban retired, and that opened up the Washington job, which opened up the Arizona job. And you saw sitting head coaches leave just to go and be a part of the Alabama staff. And anyway, that's kind of what could happen with Louisville. So keep an eye on the Louisville job. I'm not saying Kyle Smith is in the running for that position specifically, but there could be jobs of interest to him that open up based on what Louisville does.
We'll end with the impossible question, so we will not hold you to this because it's the NCAA tournament and nothing is crazier and more unpredictable.
I'm holding him to it.
Last year we get one of those Final Fours. It's like completely random. I can't remember how many times it had happened, but like top 3 seeds I think made it. You had a 4 versus a 5 and a 5 versus a 9 in the Final Four with a 4 versus a 5 in the national championship. So when you look at the bracket this year, do we expect more chaos, more upsets, crazy matchups, or is this a year where it's a lot of chalk and you get some 1 and 2 seeds in the Final Four? How you feeling about the way this one plays out, and who are some of the teams, whether they be surprise teams or favorites, that you like to make it all the way to the Final Four?
No, I think we're going to see a significant number of double-digit seeds win at least one game in this thing. I mean, I look at a team like, let's go to James Madison, for example. 31 wins. They began their season with a victory at Michigan State. And they've got what I think is a fairly favorable first-round matchup against a Wisconsin team that was not at its best to close the regular season. So, those 12-5 games, obviously always something to watch. I love James Madison in that spot. I love Will Wade at McNeese in that spot, playing against a Gonzaga team that I think is, maybe is seated a touch too high based on what it accomplished this season. And I don't necessarily see a chalky Final Four. I don't think it's going to be as chaotic as last year's. I've got 2 1s, a 2, and a 3 in my Final Four. And that, that's subject to change, but at the moment it's Illinois, North Carolina, Marquette, and Purdue. So that's sort of my early interpretation of this bracket.
Okay. UConn goes down, huh?
And we trust Purdue. David, what are we doing here?
David came in with hot takes.
You just never know. This thing it's March.
That's true.
You kind of got to blindfold yourself and throw a dart and just, see what happens. But, yeah, I mean, it's just like UConn's been so dominant that I almost I'm just skeptical that they can keep it going. It almost feels like they're a robot. And, at some point, that team always ends up losing, I feel like. So like I said, that East region is tough. So I got Illinois taking out UConn. It would be an upset, but that's what this time of year is all about.
Yeah, and to the Purdue point, the year after Virginia lost as a 1 seed, we probably would have said the same thing.
Yeah.
Come on, how can you take Virginia? They can't score. They lost as a 1 seed, and then they won the national title. David Cobb, he covers college hoops for CBS Sports at David W. Cobb. Good friend of the program. Thanks as always for hopping on for the breakdown of everything that we don't know, and now we feel a little more educated. So thanks as always, man, and enjoy the tournament.
Yeah, absolutely. And you guys enjoy it as well. Thank you.
There you go. David Cobb. Really good stuff from him on March Madness, which begins not really tomorrow, but kind of tomorrow, and then officially on Thursday. We got to do that whole stupid thing again.